sleep related disorders and sleep in general. Very important topic for psychiatry per se. So let's just jump right into it. As far as sleep is concerned, there are two broad categories that we need to talk about. One is insomnia and the other one is hypersomnia. Insomnia is either reduced quantity or quality of sleep. We always talk about quantity and quality. Quantity means the duration of sleep, that is usual duration is 6 to 8 hours. Whereas quality is how restful or refreshed do you feel at the end of your uninterrupted sleep cycle. So if you wake up feeling very groggy and feeling as though you need to sleep again, then that means probably the quality of sleep was very poor, and that's also part of insomnia. So it may be difficulty in falling asleep till very late in the night, or it could be getting up very early in the morning, or interrupted sleep. Keep on getting up and going back to sleep again through the night. So that is also part of insomnia. Hypersomnia is the opposite, where you have excess of sleep. It goes beyond those 6 to 8 hours, often beyond 9 hours. And even then the person does not feel refreshed. And even then the person feels like he or she needs to sleep again, and they do sleep during the daytime. They have naps throughout the day. So daytime sleepiness is very much increased in hypersomnia. Obviously, insomnia is much more common than hypersomnia, and so the causes of insomnia are many. Hypersomnia, the main important single condition that is associated with hypersomnia is narcolepsy. And also, whether it's insomnia or hypersomnia, it should be present for at least 3 different occasions in a week for at least 3 months. So if it is insomnia, it should occur in at least 3 nights in a week for 3 months. Hypersomnia, 3 episodes of hypersomnia per week for at least 3 months. So it could be medical conditions causing insomnia, or it could be psychiatric conditions causing insomnia, right? So among the medical conditions that can cause insomnia, it's pain. Pain keeps you awake throughout the night, doesn't it? Having palpitations, having breathlessness, such as an asthma attack, for example. All of these can cause insomnia. Gastritis, peptic ulcer disease, very important cause of, and very common cause of insomnia. It brings the patients in the middle of the night to the casualty so that they can take an antacid IV. Toothache, another very important cause of insomnia. So those could be the medical reasons. Psychiatrically, there are plenty. Depression, anxiety, and dementia. Let's talk about these 3 main conditions. So in anxiety, because of the arousal, as I told you during the anxiety class, falling asleep is more difficult. That means initial insomnia is seen. That is insomnia occurring during the early part of the sleep cycle. That is, falling asleep is difficult because of the high anxiety level. They are not relaxed. Because remember, for anybody to fall asleep, they should be relaxed. Relaxation is the first step towards falling asleep. If you are not relaxed, getting to sleep is very difficult. Whereas depression is the opposite, late insomnia. That means early morning awakening is seen. Early meaning 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and then not being able to sleep at all. So that is a feature of depression. Schizophrenia can go either way. I mentioned dementia because there is reversal of sleeping pattern, as we discussed. Up throughout the night and sleeping through the day. Carers don't know what to do during the night because the patient is up and about, restlessly moving up and down. Because there is confusion and disorientation as to the time of the day in dementia, right? They think day is night and night is day. So there is reversal of sleeping pattern. In mania, of course, there is no sleep at all, as you know. They are full of energy and they feel that sleeping is a waste of time. So there is absolutely no sleep. Complete sleep disruption can be seen in mania. And as you said, stimulants, taking stimulants can disrupt your sleeping pattern. Alcohol, people think when they drink that it will put them to sleep, but in the long run it messes up the sleep pattern, okay, and insomnia will set in. Stimulants such as amphetamines can cause insomnia, and as you said, caffeinated substances can also cause insomnia. Smoking, nicotine is a stimulant that can also cause insomnia. Before we go into the specific conditions, we need to talk about sleep architecture. So the types of sleep, even normal sleep, is divided into two types, that is NREM and REM. But in describing these, we also should know about the sleep waves. So if you put a person to sleep and record his brain waves through EEG, you will get predominantly 4 types of waves. DTAB, that's the way I remember it because it is in order. That is D for delta, T for theta, A for alpha, B for beta. And when I say order, it is in order of increasing amplitude. That is the up and down nature of the waves, that is higher. Amplitude is inversely proportional to frequency. Higher the frequency of the waves, lower is the amplitude. Higher the amplitude, lower is the frequency. Frequency is hertz, that is cycles per second of the wave. You understand? So DTAB is arranged in the order of increasing amplitude. So the delta waves are very small, but they are very high in frequency. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum, beta waves, large waves, but low in frequency. So where are these waves seen? In which part of sleep? See, you have to further divide NREM into 4 stages, that is stage 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have this phase of relaxation or pre-sleep period where you start to feel drowsy and all that. So that happens even before NREM. And then the stage 1 of NREM sets in, and that is characterized by theta waves, they say. And in the wakeful state, it is alpha waves. And then you have stage 2 of NREM sleep, wherein you get some special kind of waves in the EEG called sleep spindles and K complexes, which is recorded in the EEG. That is a characteristic feature of stage 2 NREM. Whereas in stage 3 and 4, they are often clubbed together because one just leads to the other, and they are all deep sleep states, stage 3 and 4 of NREM. And here the delta waves are predominant. REM is just characterized by low amplitude kind of waves. It doesn't have any names. But the other distinction between NREM and REM is NREM always comes first, followed by REM after stage 3 and 4 of NREM. So we keep alternating between non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep throughout the night. But the duration of REM sleep keeps on increasing as the sleep progresses, so that by the time it is morning, we would have had longer periods of REM sleep. NREM sleep is the quiet sleep because the body is restless because there is no hypotonia in the muscles, whereas the mind or the brain is totally resting, calm. Exactly opposite in REM sleep, which is also called paradoxical sleep, because the mind or the brain is restless. There's chaotic activity in the brain, but the muscles are paralyzed because of hypotonia. So you can't move your body during REM sleep. So REM sleep, there is complete paralysis of the body, and it is also the phase of sleep during which we dream. So dreams mostly occur during REM sleep. Sometimes they can occur in NREM also, but it's rare. It's usually in REM sleep. Unrelated to NREM and REM, generally there could be conditions which disrupt somebody's sleeping pattern. Circadian rhythm disorders. There are 3 issues. See, circadian rhythm is the biorhythm of the body, right? connected with the pineal gland and all that, if you remember your physiology. So that is the one which tells you when to get up, when to do your diurnal activities, when to get ready for bed, when to do nocturnal activity, which is nothing but sleeping. Okay, that's the one which maintains this. So there are three things that can potentially upset this circadian rhythm. One is the light. During daytime you have light. That's when you do all your activities. During night time there is darkness, and that's when you are supposed to sleep. So this is a fairly regular pattern that most of us are used to, and it is also time bound. That is the second factor. That means as dusk sets in, darkness begins to fall, doesn't it? So that's when your body knows it has to wind down on all the activities and start getting ready for sleep by relaxing. Whereas with sunrise, dawn, the body again tells itself that, well, it's time for activities, and arousal sets in. And the hormone which governs this, again related to pineal gland, anybody, is melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, and released according to the time of the day and the light during the day. So it is mostly released during late evenings, that is night. So therefore it is a sleep inducing hormone, the one which facilitates sleep, which is why we say night time is the best time to sleep. But some people do shift work, don't they? Like classic example is call center employees, because they might be sitting in our countries and catering to clients in the US, for example, 12 hours difference. So they have to work through the night because the customers in the US will be calling them during their daytime. So then the circadian rhythm is upset in these individuals who have a reversal of sleeping pattern. It messes up the whole sleeping pattern. It could also be long distance travel. For example, you going to America, you might have to change a flight midway, wait for several hours, then catch a connecting flight, then go to US. It will take what, 12 to 15 hours, is it? Or even more, I guess. So it could be long distance train travel. So all these things are upsetting to the circadian rhythm. As you said, jet lag can affect the biorhythm of the body, and sleep may be affected severely, which is quite unrelated to the stages of sleep. It is just affected. The other thing is sleep apnea. Basically, there are two types of sleep apnea. One is peripheral and the other one is central. Peripheral is when the muscles around the throat go into hypotonia and collapse on each other and cause the breathing difficulty because the airway is obstructed. So that's what happens in usually a obese person who has a lot of hypotonia in the muscles because of fat deposition. Goes to sleep in a supine position, there is pharyngeal muscle hypotonia and it just collapses on itself, and then there is blockage of airway leading to snoring and in extreme cases apnea, sudden loss of respiration, and they usually get up with a start because they are breathless throughout the night and the quality of sleep is affected because of that. Central sleep apnea is because of central causes such as respiratory centers in the brain. If those are affected, then there can be central sleep apnea. A particular type of central apnea is Cheyne-Stokes breathing, remember, from physiology and medicine. So which is like crescendo decrescendo pattern of tidal volumes, I believe, and again it leads to poor quality of sleep. So if somebody has got a sleep issue and then they are doing shift work, I always tell them, do you really need to continue in this job? Change your job to a normal pattern job. Or anybody with mental illness, where I think sleep may be affected, such as depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar, dementia, not dementia, but all the other conditions. And if they are working, I say, please maintain the regular job, regular timings, 9 to 5, that is better than doing night shifts. And for sleep apnea, you got to treat the cause, reduce the weight. Extreme cases, respiratory physician will fit them with a CPAP machine, that is a positive airway pressure maintaining machine. Only problem with that is it's that big. You have to fit it on your the mouth and nose and go to sleep. Makes you look a bit like Darth Vader, but you know, if it is becoming too much of a problem, you got to try it. Snoring is a feature of sleep apnea, and never ask the patient if he or she is snoring. They will always say, no, I don't snore. Always ask the partner who sleeps with the patient. He or she will tell you how they are suffering because of the other person's extreme snoring throughout the night. So both will have insomnia, or maybe the snorer will not have insomnia because snoring implies that he is in deep sleep. REM, remember, that's when hypotonia occurs. Right, so each of these stages, just like we discussed sexual stages, desire, arousal, orgasm, resolution, followed by a refractory period. Likewise, NREM, REM, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, especially NREM and REM, the broad category, is associated with certain disorders that happen during those phases. And some of these conditions are also called parasomnias. We'll move on to the specific conditions. So what are the conditions that are associated with NREM sleep? In other words, parasomnias. Remember that in NREM, there is no hypotonia of the muscles. The brain is relaxed. Okay, so that means the muscles can move about. Whereas in REM, the muscles are paralyzed. So accordingly, in NREM, you can have, as you said, sleepwalking or sleep talking. Sleep talking is called somniloquy, whereas sleepwalking is called somnambulism. You know what happens in sleepwalking, right? The person just gets up, even though he or she is still sleeping, and wanders about. It can be a huge risk. People can open kitchen drawers, take out knives, open the lock and walk away out of the house. So safety is an issue here. Bruxism can happen, which is what? Teeth grinding, more common among children. Night terrors again are more common among children, wherein the person just suddenly wakes up feeling very, very afraid and anxious, probably triggered by a dream, which the person will not remember. That is the feature. They just feel very terrorized, but they can't explain why they are feeling so afraid or anxious. Restless leg syndrome, which can happen in late evenings and nights, wherein the person keeps moving the legs, almost like involuntary movements. Another frightening but commonly occurring sleep phenomenon not related to narcolepsy is hypnic jerks. Hypna means sleep. Okay, so the jerks that happen during sleep is hypnic jerks. When you are in the early part of sleep, when you are feeling drowsy and about to drift off into sleep, you suddenly just get up, and usually it is preceded by a dream where you are walking on the road and you are just falling down the hole or something. So because of that, you get up in a startled way and you actually feel as though you have fallen down. So what are the REM disorders? Opposite of night terrors is nightmares. Remember, in REM I told you dreaming occurs. So a very terrifying form of dream is nightmares, where the person dreams of some kind of horrible situation where he or his family is being affected. Here the patient again feels afraid, but he is able to recall the contents of the dream. Unlike in night terror where they don't remember, in nightmares they can recall what they saw. And as we discussed, one specific type of REM disorder or hypersomnia is narcolepsy. It is sudden entry into REM sleep. That's what happens in narcolepsy. Okay. See, because normal sleep proceeds in stages, right? Pre-sleep, then stage 1, 2, 3, 4 of NREM, and then REM. What happens if a person suddenly enters REM without any previous stages? He will have sudden hypotonia, right? Because REM is characterized by hypotonia, muscle paralysis. whereas a chaotic brain activity. So that's what happens in narcolepsy, sudden daytime sleepiness. There are 4 features, so it's like a tetrad of symptoms or signs in a narcolepsy. So what are the features of this tetrad? One is daytime sleepiness, as we talked about. The other one is cataplexy, that is sudden attacks of collapsing due to hypotonia, which occur in response to some emotions such as laughter. Sometimes they say even boredom can cause it. And facial grimacing may also be a feature of cataplexy, sticking the tongue out, grunting, grimacing and all those things. But hypotonia is present in the muscles. So the person suddenly collapses as he or she is laughing, for example. That is cataplexy. Again, because of entry into REM stage. The other part of the tetrad is hallucinations, especially hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. Hypnagogic is usually hearing a voice, usually your name being called out as you are about to fall asleep. It may be normal. When you are about to fall asleep, you suddenly get a feeling as though somebody has called out your name. It's quite common actually. Hypnopompic is the opposite. That is, while you are getting up at the end of your sleep cycle, you feel as though you are hearing voices. So that may happen in narcolepsy. And the other feature, the 4th feature of the tetrad is sleep paralysis. This is also can happen normally. Have you ever experienced where you got up in the middle of the night, you are awake but you are unable to move your body? Can be quite scary, but it is normal. And that's what happens in sleep paralysis. It's probably because you wake up during the REM sleep. Remember, REM causes muscle paralysis. And if you get up during that time, you will end up with sleep paralysis. So in addition to this tetrad, that is increased daytime sleepiness, cataplexy, hypnagogic, hypnopompic hallucinations and sleep paralysis, DSM-5 also talks about reduction in hypocretin levels. Hypocretin, I believe, is a neuropeptide hormone which is associated with sleep, arousal and appetite. These levels are reduced in CSF, I believe, in persons with narcolepsy. That is one type of narcolepsy. And the other feature is in the EEG, you will find reduced REM sleep latency. That means what we discussed earlier, the person directly entering into REM, bypassing all the previous stages. So the sleep latency, that means latency means you have to go through stage 1, 2, 3, 4 of an REM before you enter REM, right? So that is latency for REM, latency period. Here there is reduction in that latency period. That means the person is hurrying through stages 1, 2, 3, 4 and entering REM sleep. So the DSM-5, in addition to this tetrad, also includes 2 investigative findings. One is reduced hypocretin levels in CSF and the other one is reduced REM sleep latency in EEG. Sometimes you can give stimulants in the treatment of narcolepsy. Amphetamines are also used. You should also try and make them to understand that sleep pattern should be regular, and if daytime sleepiness is too severe and interfering with social and occupational life, you have to get them to sleep regularly during the periods of the day when they can sleep, such as afternoons, for example. You might actually ask them to sleep during that time so that they don't fall asleep during the rest of the day. So scheduled sleeping periods may be advised in narcolepsy. Please remember, for all these conditions, there should be no other secondary explanation. That means you should not be secondary to some medical condition, or it should not be secondary to substances. Always rule out organic conditions and substances. Those are the main sleep related disorders. Finally, a word about the management. Again, biopsychosocial. For insomnia and hypersomnia, I have to treat the underlying cause. If insomnia is secondary to any of the medical conditions or psychiatric conditions, you have to treat the underlying cause. If a hypersomnia is occurring due to a secondary cause, you have to treat. What is the role of sleep medications then? Benzodiazepines. short-term treatment only. Only if the insomnia is too severe and disruptive, then you use benzodiazepines. As I keep on telling you, don't use it for too long. Instruct patient not to continue it for too long because of the risk of dependence. And we discussed that the shorter acting benzodiazepines are more liable to cause dependence. It's inversely proportional. Shorter the half-life, higher the dependence potential, because the patient will keep on using frequently to get the same effect. So role of benzodiazepines and the Z medications, zopiclone, zolpidem and all those things, it's very limited, and it has to be restricted for few weeks, maximum few weeks, days to weeks, not more than that. And it's also better to give it in combination with other things such as antidepressants if the person is also depressed. But primary insomnia, if it is primary insomnia or hypersomnia, that means them occurring on their own without any underlying cause, you have to talk about sleep hygiene. In general, regardless of the cause, whether it's primary or secondary, it's better to talk about sleep hygiene to the patient. So what are the things to be covered in sleep hygiene? Basically, you have to tell the patient not to sleep during the daytime unless they have specific condition like narcolepsy, where sleeping during a specified daytime period may be recommended. If you leave out that rare instance, generally we say don't sleep during the daytime. See, some people are blessed with having good sleep even though they sleep during the afternoon. In those individuals, I just say continue whatever you are doing. But if a person comes and tells me I fall asleep during the daytime, usually afternoons, and then I struggle to fall asleep in the night, then I say please stop the daytime sleeping. If you sleep during the daytime, falling asleep in the night will become more difficult. So maintain the same time every night to get into the bed, which is usually 10 or 10:30 or whatever, and maintain the same timing every night, because the more consistent you are with the timing, the better the sleep will become over a period of time, because falling asleep is also a type of habit. You can either fall into a good habit or bad habit as far as sleep is concerned. Try to be in the good habit of sleeping. So that would include maintaining the same time to go to sleep, not sleeping during the daytime, avoiding stimulants, especially after 6 p.m. in the evening. By stimulants, I mean alcohol, smoking, coffee, tea, chocolates, all those things. And avoid heavy exercises after 6 p.m., such as going to the gym and jogging, running, swimming, whatever. Try to do it during the daytime. Mornings are the best time. Evening should be mostly about relaxation, whatever relaxes you, because unless you relax, you won't fall asleep. So it could be different things for different people, such as reading books. Some people find relaxing. Some people find listening to light music relaxing. Some people feel that taking a warm shower before going to bed is very relaxing. Some people find drinking warm milk without any additions to be relaxing, and that makes sense because milk contains high serotonin levels also. And remember that serotonin is pro-sleep neurotransmitter. Bananas also contain high serotonin levels, I believe, so that is also recommended as one of the foodstuffs that you can take to improve sleep. So avoiding gadgets during their bedtime. So because the gadgets emit different type of light, the LED sources of light and all that, that is supposed to affect your sleep, keep you awake. Okay, so you should avoid gadgets, screen time during bedtime, and whatever relaxes you also includes doing deep breathing exercises, or even the progressive muscular relaxation therapy. If the anxiety is too high, you can do that also just before you fall asleep. It could be meditation, it could be yoga, especially to do with the pranayamas, that is the breathing exercises. That will get you to relax. Anything that helps you relax. I'm not saying you have to do all of these. You have to find yourself what relaxes you and try to do that as much as you can, so that you can relax and eventually fall asleep. And don't forget to mention about the environment. where the person sleeps. That is, the room should be quiet, there should not be any sources of noise. The room should be the right light, that means it should not be too bright, because remember, the melatonin is released in response to darkness. So if you keep the room bright while you are sleeping, that is affected. And also the temperature should be the ambient temperature, neither too hot nor too cold. So these are the components of sleep hygiene, which I talk to every patient who has a sleep related issue, because the idea is to get them to sleep as naturally as possible, because the moment you start using medications to help them sleep, that means the natural rhythm is being upset, and that should not happen. Natural is always best. That's the reason sleep hygiene is advised, probably in conjunction with and sometimes over and above medications such as benzodiazepines or Z medications. So that's about sleep hygiene and all the sleep disorders.